I had a very unsuccessful marriage. My ex-husband drank a lot, which caused him to be very unstable, and he would occasionally use violence against me. Whenever this happened, I always felt very scared and helpless. Although I was in great pain, I chose to endure it for the sake of my children. I knew that divorce would be very damaging to my children. I tried to stay positive and face my children, but it was not an easy thing to do. When my son went to college, I started to rethink my marriage. I realized that I couldn't take the pain anymore. I decided to end the marriage, which was a very difficult decision. But I also knew it was the right decision because I didn't want to continue to suffer this pain. Looking back on this marriage, I recognize that I had my share of blame. I also learned a lot, which has helped me grow into a more independent and stronger person. When I got divorced, I moved out of my former home. I found an old apartment that was cheap but needed to be redecorated. Since I didn't have much money on me, I decided to do the renovations myself. Not only would it make my new home look better, but it would also give me a better sense of accomplishment. I purchased some cheap paint. The regulations were not as strict as they are now, and many of the paints had excessive formaldehyde levels. I knew it would have an impact on my health, but I didn't have the extra money to buy very expensive paints. In addition to decorating, I had another problem to face. I had surgery on my back 3 years ago and still need to take painkillers to relieve the pain. I know the long-term use of painkillers can take a toll on my health, but my pain has made me dependent on them. I am trying to find other ways to relieve the pain, such as yoga and massage, but I know it will take time and patience. As a devout Christian, I have tried to incorporate my faith into my life. Hopefully, my family members will be influenced by me as well. I put God first. I hope that God will protect my family from any harm. Even though I always believed in the power of God, my marriage ended in failure. It was hard for me to get any help and support when I was at my most vulnerable. I expected to have the support and help of those around me, but in reality there was none. This was very disappointing and surprising to me. At the time, I was living in a friend's house, and I wanted to move into my new home early, so I worked late every day. The renovation was very troublesome and the whole process very time-consuming. Each piece of furniture had a different color and texture, and I had to carefully mix different paint colors to make them look more harmonious. One day, after working for 7 hours straight, I felt pain in my back. I took a lot of painkillers to relieve the pain, but these medications also made me feel very tired. I felt like I needed to take a break. The air in the room was pungent, but I didn't care too much, because I was so sleepy. So I lay down on the couch and fell asleep. I don't know how long it took, but I felt it was getting harder and harder to breathe. I tried to stand up, but I couldn't move my body. I knew that the air in the room might be poisonous, but I didn't take any measures to protect myself. I tried to shout, but I got no response from anyone. I felt like I was leaving this world. My soul was leaving my body, and it began to move upward. The movement was accompanied by a slight sense of trembling. My vision became broader, and I was able to see every corner of the room. As I was rising, I had a very wonderful feeling. My body was lying motionless on the floor. I felt like an observer. My mind was now very clear, and my perception seemed sharper, but I couldn't understand what I was experiencing. I felt like I was dreaming, but there was a big difference between this feeling and dreaming. I began to feel scared. I didn't know if I would stay in this state forever. Suddenly, I appeared in a dark space. When I reached the dark space, I felt a sense of indescribable fear. I didn't dare to make any movement because I didn't know what kind of reaction I would get. I could feel some kind of creatures around me approaching toward me. And this feeling made me even more fearful and uneasy. The creatures were moving faster and faster, as if they were aware of my presence. I don't know why, but I could see them clearly in the darkness. Their appearance was somewhat similar to humans, but much taller than them. Their skin looked very hard and took on a grayish hue. In the midst of this fear, my emotions became unusually anxious. I didn't know what they wanted to do, but I knew they were definitely malicious. I felt like I was about to be dragged by them into an endless abyss of darkness. Suddenly a light appeared in front of my eyes. The light was strong, but I could feel the warmth and hope it brought. The light grew brighter and brighter until I could not see anything. Then, I was dragged out of the darkness. I felt a strong tug pulling me forward. Gradually, the darkness disappeared. I found myself being taken to a completely different place. Here, everything was bright and full of warmth and calm. The air here was fresh and free of the pungent smell from before. This was a beautiful space. I felt strange, because just now I was shrouded in darkness. I noticed a magnificent building ahead of me with a golden ball on top of it, which I think was its symbol. The door of the building opened and out of it came a man in a long white robe. He came toward me, and he was holding a book in his hand. The book looked ancient, and its cover was made of heavy leather. There were some strange symbols and patterns engraved on it. As I looked at the book, I felt a mysterious power emanating from it, making me wonder what the book was about. The man in the white robe had a kind look in his eyes. He patted me on the shoulder, and at that moment, I felt a familiar feeling, as if I had lived in this place before. I felt accepted by this place. As if this was my forever home. I knew that no matter what happened, I could find peace and shelter in this place. The man in the long white robe said, "Welcome home." I felt very strange and I asked, "Where is this place? Who am I? How did I get here?" The man replied, "You have lived here before. You came here to continue your mission." He explained to me, "This is a very special place that transcends anything you have ever known. Many people refer to this place as heaven." I asked him, "What is my mission?" He smiled and replied, "You will know when you go back." I said, "Go back? Can't I stay here?" He said, "You can stay, it's up to you to decide. This place is indeed a wonderful world, but if you choose to stay, you will never be able to return to your old life. I can't make the choice for you, but whatever choice you make, I will respect your decision." I asked him, "What decision should I make?" He replied, "You must listen to your inner voice. Are you willing to let go of your family?" When it comes to my family, the only thing I think of is my son. When I think of my son, my heart is filled with anxiety. I can't imagine how he will live when he leaves me. His father is not a competent guardian. He can't even take care of himself. I didn't want my son to live with him, I had to go back. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the couch. A pungent smell permeated my surroundings. I tried to stand up, but I fell back onto the couch. I felt so weak that I could hardly perform even simple actions. I stood up with all my might and walked to the door of my room. I pulled the door open with force and walked into the stairwell. Suddenly, my eyes became black and I fainted on the floor. I couldn't control my body, and it was as if I had lost all my strength. I knew that I needed help. I closed my eyes and prayed silently that God would help me. When I woke up again, I found myself in a hospital bed. The doctor told me that I had been unconscious for several hours and that my neighbor had found me. If I had arrived at the hospital later, the consequences could have been serious. Hearing this, I was very grateful to my neighbor. Later, when I learned something, I felt it was my prayers that had been answered. Our apartment was very old and did not have many residents. That morning, my neighbor was on his way to work when he realized he had left his wallet at home. He thought he couldn't take the subway without his wallet, so he had to go home to get it. Just as he was about to enter the door, he suddenly heard the sound of me falling to the ground in the stairwell. He rushed up the stairs and found me passed out in the stairwell. He called the emergency number first and then waited until the ambulance arrived. I am very grateful to my neighbor for his help and to God for hearing my prayers and allowing me to continue living in this world. I didn't tell my son about it at the time because I didn't want him to be worried and I didn't want his schooling to be affected. Even though I was a single mom and life wasn't easy, I always felt God watching over me. It's been many years since this happened and I feel so relieved that my son is now a father of 2. I still remember the moment my son became a father. He looked so mature and confident. I am proud of him and proud of myself. I have learned to appreciate life and everyone I spend time with. I also learned to trust myself and God, even in the face of difficult times. I feel very content and grateful for my life. Although I have gone through many difficulties, God has been with me through every one of them. I am also proud of my decision. Although it may not have been the best choice at the time, I believe that every decision was part of my growth. Now, I enjoy the time I have with my family. As incredible as this event sounds, it is true that God saved me. God is very real. Although every prayer we pray is not always answered, I know God is doing what He thinks is right. This experience of mine happened in the summer of 1998. At that time, I had been divorced for 5 years. I was a single mother and I was living with my son. Single parents face many challenges, and I was no exception. After my divorce, I needed to take on the responsibility of caring for my son while dealing with other stressors. This was a time when I needed to be stronger than others and needed to create a stable living environment for myself and my son. I love my children deeply. My son is my strength and motivation, whether it is difficult in life or mentally exhausting. I not only want to provide for his material needs, but also give him love and care. Despite the many difficulties I have faced, I have never given up. I always believed that the future would be better if I persisted in my efforts. It was a hot weekend. My colleague and I often went out together. She was in a similar situation as me and was also a single mother. In the past year, we often rode bikes or hiked together. This time, my coworker suggested we go on a rafting experience. We were all very excited when we found out about it. We started planning the time and place. We simply packed our bags and then started our rafting trip. An hour later, we arrived at our destination and excitedly rented 2 rafting boats. Boating was a very enjoyable thing to do in this hot summer. We paddled, enjoying the cool water and the beautiful scenery, and the kids were very happy. Soon, we came to the main river. I put my feet in the water and felt the coolness of the current. We soon came to the first bend and the current suddenly became fast. We carefully controlled the direction and speed of the boat. We managed to avoid the rocks and branches in the river. We continued on through the river, enjoying the beautiful scenery along the way. After about an hour or so, we came across a more dangerous bend. My colleague and I felt some nervousness, but we trusted our skills. As the boat went through the bend, it unfortunately hit a rock underwater. I lost my balance and eventually I fell into the water. The water was moving faster and faster and I was trying to control my body. The boat was getting farther and farther away from me and I felt very scared and desperate. I was carried by the current into deeper water and the undertow began to wrap around me, gradually making it impossible for me to breathe properly. I struggled to get a breath of fresh air, but I could not reach the surface of the water. I used all my strength, hoping to surface, but all my efforts were to no avail. I began to lose consciousness and my whole body sank underwater. I felt the water around me gradually become still, and only the sound of my heartbeat echoed in the darkness. I began to remember my past experiences. I grew up as a strong child, always challenging myself. I grew up to be a single mother, living alone with my child. I worked twice as hard for the sake of my children. No one could appreciate this hard work for me. I now don't have the panic I had before, but only one idea: to give up the struggle and accept the fact. I thought it might be a relief. Suddenly, I felt someone grabbed my clothes and brought me to the surface of the water. I felt my body become very light, as if I had gained a new life. The sun shone on my face, making me feel very comfortable. The breeze blew across my skin, giving me a cool sensation. I noticed that a tree appeared in front of me, which was very tall. The breeze blew through the leaves, and they made a wonderful sound as if they were speaking to me. I felt like I was part of this tree, and that I was breathing with this tree here. Everything around me seems to be alive. The trees and flowers became more distinct. I felt like my vision was magnified and every detail became clear. Suddenly, a small bird flew over my head. I could hear its crisp song and feel its happy mood. I didn't need to turn around to see everything that was happening around me, because my vision had expanded to look anywhere I wanted. I felt that I had become part of the world, that I was one with it. At the same time I could see what was happening below. My son crawled out of the water with difficulty. His clothes were soaked through. Thankfully, he didn't seem to be hurt. I could see my own body, which lay quietly under the water, no longer breathing. I did not feel sadness or pain now. Instead, I felt a wonderful sense of peace, as if I had said goodbye to my past life. When I looked at my son again, he was seeking help from others. I felt as if I had become him, and I could feel the fear and nervousness he was feeling. Fortunately, my son was wearing a life jacket, so he was not in danger. I have to find a way to save my mom. These were his most real thoughts at that time. Suddenly, a huge figure appeared in front of me. I felt an intense love, a feeling that is hard to put into words. I knew this was God. He smiled at me and then said, "My son, welcome home. I have seen how hard you have worked and given for your son, and I know all that you have gone through. You don't have to worry, because I will never leave you." God invited me for a walk in the garden. We walked and talked. I was struck by the beauty of the many strange creatures and plants that I saw here. Some of the creatures emitted a soft glow that made the whole heaven bright and mysterious. I saw a butterfly with particularly beautiful wings. Its wings were covered with spots of various colors. Under the sunlight, each color emitted a jewel-like glow. In addition to the creatures, I also saw some exotic plants. One of them was a tree whose trunk and leaves were glowing blue and purple. The leaves emitted a faint fragrance, making me feel as if I was in a fairy tale world. I felt very happy in this magical paradise. I felt true peace, as if the whole world had become gentle and beautiful. I knew that these wonderful sights would become memories that I would never forget. God took me into the depths of the garden. Sometimes, God would point out to me some special spots and tell me the stories and mysteries of the area. In a meadow, I saw a little rabbit that was busy nibbling on a blade of grass. God told me that this little rabbit was a symbol of joy. In another corner, I saw a cute little squirrel. It was hopping happily, as if it was looking for some treasure. God told me that this little squirrel represents good luck. Here, every creature and plant has its own story and symbolism, and together, they make up this wonderful paradise. It is also a delightful thing to walk in paradise. Finally, God asked me, "What do you want to choose next?" I understood that I needed to make a choice. To choose to stay or to go back. At this moment, I felt very torn inside, because I didn't know what to do. Staying in heaven, I could continue to enjoy this beauty and happiness, but I would lose the opportunity to be with my loved ones. I understand that this matter is completely up to me. No one is forcing me to make this or that choice, and no one is guiding me. God just silently waited for me and gave me time to think. I didn't know then what I should do. When I saw God smile, I suddenly felt a surge of strength. This strength gave me stronger courage and confidence. I knew that no matter what choice I made, God would always be with me, and His love would always be there for me. In the end, I decided to return to the real world. I knew that it was not an easy decision, but I believed that I had made the right choice. At the moment I turned to leave, I saw God smile and nod. I felt my soul being gently wrapped by an invisible force, which carried me slowly out of heaven. Then I felt as if I was flying, and the scenery around me began to become clearer and clearer. I saw blue oceans, green forests, and white clouds. I knew God was sending me back to earth. Slowly, I began to feel the weight of my body. My soul was slowly merging with my body. A powerful energy passed through my body and made me feel my presence again. When I returned to my body, I felt full of power. I swam to the surface with all the strength I could muster. I spit out the silt in my mouth and took a deep breath. At this moment, my lungs were so sore that it felt worse than drowning. But I knew I needed to keep going, because my son needed me. I felt my strength growing, a strength that came from within me and from the blessing and love of God. I felt like every cell in my body was cheering me on and giving me strength. My breathing started to become steady. My lungs felt a little better. There was still some pain, but it was much better than earlier. I started to swim closer to the shore so I could grab the rocks with my hands. Finally, I managed to reach the shore. I felt my whole body trembling, but at the same time I also felt an inexplicable joy. I lay down on the shore with my whole body helpless. Just then, I heard a familiar voice. It was my son calling out to me. He and some tourists were running to me. I struggled to open my eyes, and my son's expression was full of worry. My son was hugging me and tears were streaming down his face. I gently patted his back and reassured him, "Mom is fine, don't worry." Finally, the administrator took me to the nearest hospital. In the hospital, the doctor checked my body. The doctor told me, "There is nothing serious, just need to rest for a few days." I am very grateful to those who have helped me. I thank them for their timely help, and I also thank God for His blessing and care. In the hospital, I felt the love of my son. He was always by my side. He was worried that I would get bored, so he kept talking to me. I lamented my good fortune to have such a loving son. I know that I must continue to fight for my son. Show him through my actions how strong and brave his mother is. To this day, I think back to this experience often. I thank God for this opportunity to be born again. I know I made the right choice. I proved that God and His love are real. I feel incredibly blessed that He has always been there for me.